Welcome to Virtual Concert Hall's live music channel. My name is Chris Au, and I have with me the co-founder of Virtual Concert Halls, Dr. Anna Ouspenskaya.
Chris, thank you, and welcome everyone. It's a pleasure to be here and exploring the next chapter.
Yes, and we'll be your hosts for today's show. This is part 5 of the documentary of Beethoven's Symphony No. 3, written and narrated by Lawrence Rabchuk, created by New Media Productions Worldwide and Virtual Concert Halls, as well as produced by the Architects of Music.
We're very grateful for this ongoing collaboration for many years, and it's been made possible by our shared passion to bringing musicians, artists, various events to the audiences around the globe.
It's well known that Beethoven dedicated this Eroica symphony to Napoleon, who, despite his ongoing wars against Austria and other countries, was still regarded as the great liberator of the oppressed. But Beethoven's attitude took a distinct turn in May of 1804 when Napoleon proclaimed himself Emperor of France. The enemy of tyranny had now become a tyrant himself, as often happens. But Beethoven, of course, was outraged. He tore the cover page with the dedication off of the score. But still, Beethoven's opinion of Napoleon would continue to evolve, as does the heroic tone and scope of this Eroica symphony now, because the second movement follows directly in the footsteps of those major post-revolutionary composers in France, with those large, massive choral works, the composers Méhul and Gosset, Cherubini, and their grand public oratory style. Here is a brief excerpt by one of these composers, Franz Joseph Gosset. He had a very lengthy career that spanned both the pre-revolutionary period and the post-revolutionary period. So you hear his music change because he had to write for what was required of him. Here is a familiar work, this lovely gavotte. It was obviously from the pre-revolutionary period in France, written for the royal court. I'm sure you recognize this. I adore this music. I've conducted it often. But Gosset was also the composer of this rather dissimilar later work, which you will hear. Actually, it was written for General Lafayette's National Assembly Band to commemorate the victims of the French Revolution. And the second movement of Beethoven's Eroica Symphony was clearly inspired by this stately, grave, ceremonial idiom, which would then suggest a certain extra musical or even programmatic element to it. And coincidentally, we see at this time that Beethoven's interest began to expand into the world of theater, with his stage music for Prometheus, a historic overture on Coriolanus, the oratorio Christ on the Mount of Olives, and his plan now to compose an opera. So things are evolving now into the dramatic sphere. But this public ceremonial music would only be used as a point of departure for Beethoven into an entirely new dimension, an alternate universe, you might even say. We hear this somber main theme in the first violins, and it is accompanied by this figure in the double basses. And with the theme added in the violins, basses play. The basses in the orchestra are entirely on their own. There's no cellos with them. It's a very striking effect, the march-like tread that we hear that represents the steady movement of the funeral procession. And Beethoven's amazing ability to transform these more programmatic elements into pure orchestral sound becomes apparent now when the oboe takes up the theme, and the entire body of strings now imitates subtly the beating of muffled drums. And the march now has a second phase to it. It's now in the major key of E flat major, and it's striking in its dignified eloquence. We move back into C minor now with this ominous figure in the cellos. Which will become very important later on. And the grandeur, the breadth of this opening, it's intensified by Beethoven's brilliant use of orchestral color. And think about it. His orchestra is meager compared to, say, Mahler's orchestra in Mahler's big C minor funeral march that opens his second symphony. But Beethoven's vision is that much more amazing because the effect of his orchestration is so much more concentrated and distilled. And the closing now of this first section of the march is announced by woodwinds and horns, with more muffled drums and much wailing from the violins. And again, the solo oboe, but now serene, comforting in the key of C major. And the march rhythm is now softened up in the lower strings to this. And we heard this gentle arpeggiated figure in the violins, which is so typical of this French public sentiment of this period. I know this may sound a little too poetic, but there's something very, very intense here in its gentleness, this hymn-like simplicity that inspires the masses and leads them on, caressed by the sunlight, the beauty, the flow of nature. It's in the music, which will then rise to a grand cadence in the dominant key of G major. Pure G major, full orchestra, as if the cortege has come to a halt with this grand ceremonial flourish. And this lovely interlude now in the major key resumes, and it rises to even greater emotional heights. And again, this is so typical of the post-revolutionary fervor of the time, when hymns were being written not for religious use, but for grand public celebrations. Hymns to liberty and to justice and to wisdom, humanity, nature, the sun, and whatever. As the procession now reaches its final military-style salute, this time in the tonic key of C major. did you hear there how the music suddenly died at the height of its triumph, how the life went right out of it? And we now hear a reprise of the opening funeral march in C minor. So, as an architectural review of the music this far, we have the opening funeral march played twice, first by the strings, then by the oboe, then the lyrical second part of the march in E flat, this ominous motive in the cello, which extends the march, and now the closing section, including the wind's powerful leading to the lovely C major interlude, which does not appear at any other point in this movement, alas, ending with its grand flourish first in G major, continuing then and ending another flourish in C major. Then we suddenly shift back to C minor, and the opening march is restated. So that is the shape and the form thus far.
Wow. Fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah, I find it to be really interesting how Beethoven was quite influenced by the French music. We don't really associate this kind of music with French music, so to speak, but it's the French music of the time.
That's right, and he knew what to be influenced and fascinated with. So there was no internet for him to find out what French were writing at the time.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, it's really interesting that we don't associate this music that we're hearing in the second movement as French music. But obviously, Larry Rabchak has done his research, so he knows that there's a lot of French music influences. In that C major interlude, I never would have associated that with sort of a French hymn that's inspired the masses, full of hope, etc. Yeah. Did you know this, or were you aware of this at all?
Nope.
Or yeah.
Well, I think French music of the time was on the list of influences on Beethoven, but I don't remember diving that deeply into it ever. So
yeah.
Larry really digs out a lot deeper than what we even professional musicians normally do, and that's the tremendous value of these films, because what he brings to the table is way beyond conservatory education or just the professional education. So, and that's so, and his narration is so public, so user friendly that I think anyone who is curious about just learning about the symphonies can totally relate to that and understand. He's not really using that much even professional lingo, and very passingly explains what his terms mean, so concise and so clear, common sense kind of.
Yeah, what's interesting to me, I mean, I did a little course on French music around the time of the French Revolution, and I am aware that it is quite romantic sounding. When we hear French music, we usually associate it generally maybe Rameau and Couperin, but generally speaking, like Debussy, Ravel, Fauré, maybe Saint-Saëns in some form or other. But we usually have this sort of maybe late 19th century association with French music. But of course, French music was written around the time of Napoleon, and especially after the French Revolution did away with a lot of religious music, and there was a new worshipping of some sort of a different way of, I guess, bringing the masses together through music, and art had to sort of reflect a different period. Obviously, that's why, that composer that Rabchak mentions stopped writing gavottes and is writing different, music that reflects the time. And it really begs the question, what kind of music do you think would reflect the times now? There's such a variety of different music all around the world. It's a very difficult question to answer, actually, because our world has become so globalized. If you that a lot of people are just trying to specialize, even just to distinguish themselves from one another. But it's hard to really find an exact point of, like, how do we write music for now? How do we write music for the modern time?
Yeah, you mean like 100 years from now, another Chris and Anna will be discussing our time, right? And saying, okay, well, that was the trend.
Yeah,
in the music.
I mean, like, I wonder if you, I mean, of course, like some big music festival like Coachella, you look at all the music that's been presented there, and would you say that's the music that represents, 2025, 2026? And if,
Uh,
I don't know, what do you think?
That's a risky proposition to answer this question. What if I'm going to be wrong?
Well, I mean, right or
Well,
wrong, I mean,
no.
it's hard to come up with the right answer too, like is the music, is the art that we see in contemporary art museums or modern art museums at the, is that, um, what represents the times or not? I think this is a very interesting question to ask, but
Oh,
also
I think.
no matter what you say, it's very difficult to get the right or wrong answer for.
Oh, yeah, I agree completely. And that's actually a quite instrumental question because even just answering that question can give a creator of today quite a bit of foresight into the direction where they want to go. Because ultimately, for anyone writing music today, and even for me as a performer, now we have ability to record our own performances. Some of it is about legacy. We kind of all want to leave something valuable behind, and something which people will come back to and find inspiration, find signature of the time, whatever they find something valuable in it. And so for someone to guess what the future generations are going to value as the representation of our time and pivot in that direction and start writing in that direction, that's a very lucky guess, don't you think?
Yeah, and also what's apparent to me is also that throughout the ages, music has always sort of lagged behind, ever so slightly behind, let's say, art or even literature, because I think it takes time for musicians to come up with a language that reflects either the art or the literature that is being represented. Like, romantic art and literature was more available before romantic music became such a thing. And even now, if you think of, okay, well, let's say we do the music for Coachella, and we kind of find some themes, some sort of things that might represent the times now. And then we have to think about, okay, well, if I'm going to write a symphony about this modern era, I also have to come up with a language that represents it. And by the time you come up with a language that represents it, it'll be 2027, 2028, or maybe 2029. And so you're always kind of catching up in a way. But I do find perhaps, movie music these days, especially, movie music that is perhaps a bit more moving, or let's just say well written for its genre. Maybe that also represents some of what we're interested in a modern times. But yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think if we were to project something into the future, we kind of need to start by looking into the history. So today, what do we consider as music representing its time? When you try to pick out something from the head and spot, that's most likely not going to be a 3-minute piece like some little mazurka by Field, right? It's more likely going to be a Beethoven symphony or Mahler's symphony or Passion of Matthew by Bach, or something grandiose, something which encompasses many elements as opposed to maybe just one flute playing a little piece. And then from there, you notice the name of the composer and you trickle down from their more panoramic genres down to their smaller genres, and then to miniatures, and then you can go exponentially more complex in answering that question. But I think most of the time the peak highlights are large canvases. So what is large? Then if history teaches us anything about projecting the future, then we need to look at the large canvases. And you're absolutely right. I think the film soundtrack music is one of the examples, especially when it's written by composers who incorporate variety of different styles in it. If there are some large film soundtracks which are mostly focused on just sounds, and there are some which are written in a more in a very varied way, including some sections which sound symphonic, or some sections which sound lyrical or pop song like. So it's like a synthetic genre, and film is not going anywhere. I mean, it's changing its shape and form and so forth. And it used to be you go to the theater to see any film. Now you go to Netflix to see series. And but it doesn't matter. The visual storytelling, which includes musical storytelling, is here to stay. That's for certain. There's another sphere where I think epic music and this synthetic genre music, which incorporates everything from instrumental to vocal to ethnic to symphonic to sound combined sound bites combination, is a game. And game is another form of storytelling, pretty much like a film, with a difference there, you being sort of a co-creator of your own version of that film. And the game soundtracks are fantastic. They engage phenomenal musicians, and they pay well. So all the greatest musicians are flocking to those gigs. And another thing which game industry was able to produce is very large collectively created music scoring, which is not a completely new invention, of course, but the core composing of the score probably is very well represented in music created for game. I mean, for also for some mainstream genres, it's also there too. Like bands, they co-create often their songs and so forth. But with music for game, that's taken almost epic proportions. So you have a whole team of composers collaborating and building that soundtrack. That's pretty grandiose. So I think somewhere in those genres is where people from the future are going to say that represents our time.
I love this response because I think it encapsulates our world quite well, which I'm pleasantly surprised to hear you mention, game as well as part of this, what constitutes art, and what strikes me as you were talking about movie, song as well, and game is that perhaps our musical world is heading towards an era where certain musical sounds, let's whether it's symphonic, whether it's big band jazz, whether it's or the organ, or certain, it always relates to a certain visual aesthetic. I think perhaps the people who were living in Beethoven's time would associate certain themes with like a folk tune, or certain things as a fanfare, a trumpet, or something of a regal form. Maybe less visual, but still visual in a way, obviously, because when I mention something bucolic or pastoral, of course you think of a certain scene. But more and more so because we're such visual creatures, and with movie and music, everything with sound is directly associated with something visual that you can see and touch, or at least see in your mind. Maybe this is the language of music going forward, which is whenever you write something, whenever you're composing something, the listener automatically, in a way, hears something. Especially in if you're writing for the games genre or the movie genre, like something has to, it just clicks. You're not going to hear something symphonic and think during a horror movie, or it could, but it's a different kind of sound. And I think I think that's the kind of language that is morphing as we go. And how interesting that when we talk about Beethoven and what he did for his time, it allows us to have conversations about what we're doing now, because he was trying to be relevant to his audience, and we are trying to see how we can be relevant as musicians as well in this modern era. So with that, I want to give a big thanks to our sponsors, our team, our collaborators, which have include New Media Productions, Virtual Concert Halls, Architects of Music, and of course our wonderful Larry Rapchak. I want to give a big thanks to Dr. Anna for joining us on this wonderful show, and thank you all the sponsors and supporters for being a part of this project. We cannot do this all alone. This wonderful team that you see on the screen is crucial in making all of this happen, in making sure that we have brilliant shows that are curated for you, our wonderful audience. And we look forward to hearing what you think. If you have any ideas or projects or certain things that inspire you, we'd love to hear it, because this whole project of the Beethoven Symphonies came about because we had an idea and a project, and so we love to broadcast this all over the world if possible. And so if you have a project, please let us know by our websites that you can see on the screen below, and check out our Music and Musicians Around the Globe daily live show, which features a lot of artists, concerts, educational and film projects, things that would obviously interest you, it has to, but also interest our audience. And so please check that out. And with that, thank you for joining us today. It's been a real pleasure to have you, and we'll see you next time for part 6 of our Beethoven 3 documentary series. Bye for now.